Welcome to the Everything Epigenetics podcast, where we discuss DNA regulation and the insights it can tell you about your health. I'm Hannah Went, and I'm the founder of Everything Epigenetics. Today, my guest is Dr. Mahsin Habib. I've actually been lucky to know Dr. Habib for quite some time. I was even luckier to meet him in person a couple years back at a hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy conference in Orlando, Florida. Dr. Habib is an internal medicine physician with several locations in the Washington, D.C. area. His practice, Next Health, is an advanced medical practice performing executive physicals and ultra health programs. His expertise is rooted in using objective data when delivering therapies either in a preventative manner or reversing disease at its root. Dr. Habib uses measurements like epigenetic age, advanced cardiac tests, intracellular vitamin levels, brain functional EEGs, and the latest and greatest biomarkers. Today, we are going to discuss how he utilizes epigenetic methylation testing in his practice. We'll start with the basics, which will include learning more about how he practices medicine in the functional space. We will also talk about how he optimizes his patients' epigenetics. Dr. Habib is uniquely qualified as these are the same topics he works with his patients on every single day. Dr. Habib began his medical journey in 1988 as a student at the University of Sheffield Medical School in England. Upon graduation in 1993, he began working at the Department of Accident and Emergency at Good Hope Hospital and the Department of Psychiatry at Highcroft Hospital in the UK. In 1996, he left for the United States, accepting an externship in cardiology in Arizona, and shortly thereafter, an internal medicine residency at Bay State Medical Center in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dr. Habib's passion and determination for health and medicine began to evolve during his time in the U.S. In 2000, his residency ended and he began to work on a different approach, integrating fitness and nutrition into his professional practice. A year later, he founded his practice, which I mentioned earlier, named Next Health. This was the very first medical clinic to offer fitness, nutrition, and medical services under one roof. A few years later, he incorporated a weight loss program into the clinic's offering, and in 2006, he officially began practicing integrative medicine. Always seeking to innovate by leveraging the newest technologies and perspectives, he began offering a food inflammation test, or FIT, and advanced cardiac test, as well as many other cutting-edge tools and techniques for his patients. This innovative spirit was and is buoyed by his sincere desire for healing by focusing on the root causes of diseases. And his imagination fuels an irresistible aspiration that most doctors are not even aware of. By 2014, he was able to test for early cancer markers, implement advanced genetic and telomere testing, and has demonstrated success in reversing biological age, which is the true pathway to optimal function while preventing disease. His journey culminated in 2015 when he trademarked the term Rethink Medicine and formed what came to be known as the Executive Physical and the Ultra Health Program. Comprehensive and customized healing solutions utilizing the most appropriate tools and technologies for his respective patients. This rethinking of health and medicine has truly disrupted the current medical industry and has propelled Dr. Habib and Next Health to the forefront of integrative and regenerative medicine. His passion to rethink medicine and to never be satisfied with the status quo makes him one of the most inquisitive and creative medical practitioners today. Dr. Habib sees what most every doctor sees, but he thinks like no other. His can-do attitude and proactive approach to medicine and healing has served as the foundation of his practice, which can be summed up in 3 words: predict, prevent, and prolong. And now for my discussion with Dr. Habib. Welcome to the Everything Epigenetics podcast, Dr. Habib. We're really excited to have you today.
I really appreciate having me. I'm excited to have a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I gave all of our listeners an introduction to you before we started talking, and we know that you now practice integrative and regenerative medicine in Virginia. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your journey? What have been the true key turning points to where you are today?
It's very interesting. I'll try not to make it too long. It was an adventure getting into medical school. I have to admit, I wasn't that passionate. Both my parents were kind of in the medical field. I couldn't think of anything better. Doesn't sound very exciting or confidence-inducing. However, I found my stride when I opened my own practice. Having gone through the academic system in UK, and done the residence in the USA, it was nice to see both sides of the Atlantic in how they practice medicine. Very much traditional. And so when I opened my own practice, it was the Fitness Medical and Nutrition Center, and that should tell you that is a little different. And but nevertheless, the urgent care, I kept on seeing the same patients with the same kind of problems. And long story short, it seemed like my what I was taught wasn't actually fixing anything. So I just started to kind of keep my ears open about what was out there. And some of it seemed a little cuckoo, arginine and Lyme disease was a big thing, certainly in our neck of the woods. But once I attended some of those conferences, I was very open-minded. I found that because I was open-minded, half of it made sense because it led to the parts of my education that didn't solve those chronic problems where I couldn't fix the problems. Anyway, so that's kind of the journey. So really, I took it very personal when I opened my own practice because I wanted to be the best possible doctor for my patients or clients. And that wasn't happening. And that's why I was open to learning. And that's where I found functional medicine.
Absolutely. When I was reading through your biography, it was so interesting. You have a great history of how you've come to where you are today. So tell us your practice name again, and then explain how long you've been there, how long that's been open.
Yeah, it's Next Health, and Next Health is all about rethinking medicine. So ideally, we like to predict and prevent and extend your life. But of course, as a functional doctor, I like complicated cases. It's a funny thing when a doctor says, "That's interesting," or because what's interesting to us means it's very complicated for the patient, and that's not always the best place to be. But nevertheless, we are excited when we find something that's not cookie cutter, whereas traditional doctors get baffled that it doesn't follow the algorithm. The medicine doesn't seem to be the right fit. The diagnosis does not seem to fit the labs. They get very ruffled with that. And I tell people, first of all, I'm an MD. So it's not that I'm a different species. I'm the same doctor as you are. It's just that you never decided to get to the root of the things that frustrated you. Everything is not in a nice box. So you have to go develop and find out what are the techniques to be able to best answer the problem. And that will never end because we're going to get to better and better and deeper into the origins of where the disease process starts.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people really struggle with that, right? They want to follow the rules. They want to stay in the lines. They're scared to cross certain boundaries. But I think it's super important to start asking questions and crossing those boundaries, especially if you can't find the answer to the problem, right? You have to push those boundaries. So what really led you from the traditional medicine route then to the functional medicine route? What was that? Do you remember that turning point in your career?
Yeah, it really is. Opening my own practice, it's personal, and I had to do justice to my patients. And so it's never, there's no end to functional medicine. That means that every year I'm making improvements, and my clients love that. You don't even have to say it. They can feel it. It's innovation. And the beauty is that the risks are low because, as you correctly said, doctors are fearful of stepping off the regular path because of liability. But that's because of drugs and their side effects and these diagnoses. But if you truly optimize function, you actually can reverse disease. Not only prevent, you can actually reverse disease. There is no downside. There is no risk. The risk is the patient is going to be extra happy.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to be a patient of yours now. I can just see how passionate you are about the subject. So it makes me really happy, again, that people are out there really putting in the work to, again, find that root cause, find out why people are not feeling so great. And again, like you said, the only risk is the patient feeling so much better. They're going to be happy in return. They're going to feel better. They're going to look better. They're going to smile more, right? So tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of patients do you treat? When someone walks in your door, what is that typical avatar?
Yeah, so look, I'm a medical doctor. People come with a range of problems. It could be just waking up tired, difficulty losing weight, aches and pains, or much, much worse. My job is to get
Sure.
to the root of the problem, not only fix their problem, but make them feel young and healthy.
Yeah, definitely. And when, do patients, do you have more of the membership models that people have to join in your practice, these programs, or can people walk in and just really request to see you for any issue?
It always starts with a consultation. First we meet the individual and get a sense of what's going on before we can, ascertain whether we can help them. Of course, most of the time we can help them, but it starts with a consultation. There's no fear of any long-winded approach. But if people ask me, what is it that I do? Once I figure out what's going on, I'm going to offer two types of services. One is like an annual physical, a thorough workup. And the more thorough makes it easier for me and the individual, particularly for the client, because they can see what I'm talking about. I've been a physician for so long. It's like once I hear a few words, I kind of get 80% of the diagnosis right there.
Right.
But
boom.
But the thing is that, look, I can talk all day long. It's not about what I want to say. It's, can I help you picture what's going on? Because if I can put that picture into your mind and then give you the tools so you have the steering wheel, now you're in charge of your health and not the other way around.
Yeah, you're in the driver's seat now, right? Where you can control for some of those lifestyle factors and then work on the advice that you're giving to them, right? Yeah. From, I don't know, lifestyle, supplement, medication, procedural based level, and they're going to feel better in return. So there's nothing better than that.
Well, I just want to just add a little something. That consultation is really the most important part. You're building a relationship. And if you can build that trust, the patient is half cured already, because the power of belief is so powerful. That means that the individual has willed themselves to believe. So it's important for the doctor to be, number one, credible. Number two, be caring about the patient genuinely. And then, of course, the knowledge is the least of our, that's for granted. Every doctor should be passionate about learning, which, I have reservations about some of them, but that's okay. That's okay. So half the cure is the relationship. And I just can't understand why doctors just give that up or don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think I've ever heard, and mind you, I talk to 6 to 7 healthcare providers in our space every single day. I don't think I've heard any one of them really talk about that relationship building with their patient. It's hard. It's human nature for people to not open up, right? And not trust. You decide in 1 second when you meet the person, how comfortable you feel with them, if you like them, if you're going to be a little bit more hesitant. So I think talking about that patient and doctor relationship where you're going to gain the trust of the patients is very important.
100%. Even as you embark on that journey. So you said, what do? I do executive physical. That's like A to Z. It's higher level than a traditional physical that looks to make the diagnosis once a disease has already occurred. What I tell people is that there are 5 stages of cell decline. Most doctors diagnose at stage 4 or 5. The problem is, as the function goes down, it comes before disease. And we can not only measure those, people are actually feeling it. That's why it's so good to have functional testing, because they're feeling it and you're matching it with data. And that's one of the things I do. And then the next part is embark on a plan. I've got the information. I'm going to give you a strategy. And that goes from month to month, whether it's a membership or some kind of arrangement that I and the client will have.
Correct. So definitely data driven, right? You're seeing the metrics. You're making outcomes based on that data. There's no guesswork. Guesswork is completely taken out. So I think that's a great program. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about one of the biomarkers that you use and why I wanted you on this podcast, Everything Epigenetics, right? So you're one of the healthcare providers I've known for quite some time now. And you are one of the largest users, I would say, of epigenetic methylation testing that I know. So on your website, you even talk about making your patient's DNA biologically younger. I think that's very, very powerful. And you even say we reverse aging. Reversing the aging process is critical to preventing disease. So what does that mean? Can you just explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, look, so I'll tell you, aging is the biggest driver for disease. And disease accelerates aging, and that can take years off your life. But let me just tell you a little story about where I came from. I worked hard. I've been a physician for almost 30 years. And like many of our audience, I found myself waking up tired, turning to coffee in the afternoons. I found that in the morning, I wasn't the morning person that I usually am. One occasion, I made a really nice dish for my mom, and I was excited to give it to her. I ran up the flight of stairs to her townhouse, knocked on the door, and my knuckles hurt. It's like,
Oh, wow.
wow. I mean, those are Hebden's nodes. You see those with osteoarthritis. And so I was too young for osteoarthritis. And, all these things were happening to me. Even in the morning, I woke up and I would look in the mirror and I see these pigmentation. They were like age spots, wrinkles. So I was looking tired, feeling tired, but really I was feeling old. And that's now go back to what I just said. Most diseases are age-related diseases. So like diabetes type 2, high blood pressure, cardiac blockages, cardiovascular strokes or dementia, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. These are age-related diseases. So really aging, the parameter that we're going to be talking about, it's not superfluous. It's not just for conversation. It's trackable, and it's very much parallels the two biggest components of aging. So aging is as the blood flow goes down in a very simple way, because everything has blood flow. The number two is very interesting, the buildup of old zombie cells like senescent cells. And yet we know that the senescent cells is at the early stages, emerging science, but it's very, very convincing. And we have examples of both, right? As blood vessels, as blood flow goes down and senescent cells go up, that's part of the aging process. So we have so many functional ways to look at that. And now, because of the epigenetic age technology, we have something reproducible. We have something that's fairly accurate. And you don't have to just rely on that, because there is no one number that trumps everything. It's building a picture. But the simple equation would be the biological age is associated with a decline in blood flow and a buildup of senescent cells. And it's just a quick, simple one before we go into deeper, is that even a skin biopsy will prove the same thing. The aging skin, less blood vessels, less blood flow, increased senescent cell. And you'll find that in the brain, you'll find that in the joints, and so forth.
Yeah, wow. a lot to take in there. I agree with everything you just said. We always, preach that aging is that number one risk factor for most chronic disease and death, period. So like you said, aging is really an outwards projection of all of these other types of diseases. So what happens is, if we can identify that acceleration of that biological aging by looking at the epigenetic methylation markers, we can prevent. And I always say, when I talk to all these healthcare providers, it is a lot easier to prevent rather than intervene when the disease diagnosis already happened, right? When you get a prognosis or a diagnosis and you're starting to see even organ failure or failure at the tissue level, the cell level, then it is really hard to reverse that completely. So again, just trying to identify early, prevent, know when the markers are off or out of range, take the guesswork out of it, get this testing done to be able to make changes, because these methylation markers are changeable. That's the key too. You want to be able to shift them in your favor.
And, the both measure, everything's measurable. That's the beauty of it. And I think that what we are pattern recognizers, right? There are really smart people who developed, like Dr. Harvath, Dr. Sinclair, many of these really smart people, they gave us the information, the tools, but we're the practitioners. We have to know how to use them, not be told what to do. We have our own brain. And that's the other thing, that doctors have got so trained by pharmaceuticals that this is the indication and this is what you do. They're not, they've been almost brainwashed into thinking that that's the two-dimensional medicine you must practice. But as we all know, the human body is three-dimensional. And there are so many signals in the body, and they're all sort of communicating with each other. And so when we talk about the blood vessels and the blood flow going down, you can be sure that the same factors like inflammation that's affecting that is also causing inflammation, and your aging biomarkers, the methylation patterns on your epigenes are also, being influenced in the same way.
Right, like that domino effect, right? One thing gets better, then it's kind of sending signals or different, I would say, mechanisms of actions or pathways to other things downstream that are also going to have a benefit. Yeah. So it's really identifying that root cause. And epigenetic methylation isn't just biological age testing, right? You can get all of these other outcomes from epigenetic methylation testing. There's a lot of different biological ages, paces of aging, your telomere length age through epigenetic methylation. So it's nice to understand that aging is this multi-modality approach where you're looking at all of the outcomes synergistically in a blended methodology approach to really come up with a protocol that works for that specific person, because it's really N of 1 precision-based medicine is what you're doing, right? Yeah. And I think that's really special. So can you give a couple tips or from, without giving your entire secrets, your secret sauce away, what are some things that you would do if the biological age, if some of these markers are looking to be increased compared to their chronological age, or just out of range, not in their favor?
So listen, I'm going to try to keep it simple, because growth is great when you're young. Mm-hmm. But the pathways that lead to growth and excessive growth can lead to cancer and accelerate aging. So the growth pathways are nutrient sensing pathways. So when you're eating protein, mm-hmm. you're activating mTOR. That's great to activate that when you're young and healthy and, adolescent and young adult. When you eat carbohydrates, you activate IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, or insulin itself. Those are growth factors. So the things that are beneficial when we're younger can become a problem if we don't appreciate that there's a time to grow and a time mm-hmm. to not grow. That this is the part I'm going to explain right now. So the things that accelerate aging are excessive growth through the nutrient sensing pathways. If you block mm-hmm. those pathways temporarily, and I will explain how you get about that, you get rejuvenation. You're slowing down the growth because those were growth pathways. You just stopped it through fasting or fasting mimicking diet, caloric restriction or caloric restriction mimetics. That means to mimic. You almost make the body believe it's a state of fasting without starving yourself. You can make your body feel like a state of caloric restriction, and you can mimic that. And all that does is slows down the growth, but it's actually more powerful, because the things that slow down those growth pathways can also activate autophagy. So when you're mm-hmm. building up all these old cells, that's excessive old cells is one of the markers, one of the biggest markers, and is going to be found to be the thing that's clogging up the proteins in the Alzheimer's, the things that are clogging up the osteoarthritis, the neurodegenerative. If you can bring that back down, so the things that make you grow, slow that down. Eat fewer of those refined stuff, right? But also stop eating, fast, or find a way to mimic it. Because not everybody has the ability to fast. It's they're uncomfortable. But then these autophagy things, these things that tell the body, I'm in temporary stress. You're not putting food in, temporary stress. You use heat, temporary stress, like a sauna. You use high interval training, temporary stress. I sound like a broken record, just 2 more temporary stress. Cryotherapy, like ice bath, cold. And the yep. hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Some of these things can activate recycling. Autophagy means self-eating. So you're growing all this stuff, and if it's accelerated, it's just crud that's going to block up the cerebrovascular system, block up the cardiovascular system, clog up the joints. You can't just change your lifestyle. You've got to try to recycle some of those. And you can do it with all the modalities I just said. But when we engage with a real client, we try to find out what are the drivers, identify them, and then find tools to reverse some of those processes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, that's great. That was the perfect answer. I think that gives people idea of, the pathway to take where they can start evaluating their own health, right? If they're, have these stressors or have, they just don't feel right. Like you gave the example of, everything you went through when you saw age spots or, your hands felt sore. So if anyone is listening and they have those same factors, or you just know when you feel a little bit old or, you're stretching and it doesn't feel quite right. So definitely listen to that advice. Maybe that's something you can look into to address, again, the root cause.
So I'll just give some quick examples. One of the biggest drivers for growth, we said, was that pathway called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, or insulin itself. And carbohydrates, particularly refined carbohydrates. So if the viewers want one thing that they could invest in and try, because that 10% of that one thing might go much further than applying yourself to many other facts. That one thing is glucose. Because glucose, as redundant and so ubiquitous and so generic as it sounds, it's really the driver for not only inflammation, but aging. Because the more glucose that's circulating, even if you're not diabetic, if you have insulin resistance, you can have even more circulating glucose. They stick to proteins. We call that glycosylation. Proteins are three-dimensional structures. I know everybody thinks of them as just solid blobs of muscle and stuff. They're actually very functional. All these enzymes, the muscle fibers going back and forth, these are proteins. The thing in your mitochondria that gives you energy, the ATP, is a turbine, a three-dimensional protein. So what we're saying here is that those things need to be, taken care of. And when you have glycosylation, that's glucose molecules stuck on the proteins after a while become dysfunctional and just accumulate. A little bit like senescent cells, but this is a separate category of glycosylation of the proteins. We call them AGEs, advanced glycated end products. Did I say glycosylation? Glycation. AGE stands for, which is perfect, age. Advanced, there you go, glycated endpoints. So the accumulation of all of these advanced and glycated endpoints is dysfunctional proteins accumulating, and that's again another marker for aging. So glucose not only builds up these kind of old cells, or dysfunctional cells to be more precise, but it also turns on a switch that turns on inflammation. That's called NF-kappa B. And inflammation damages everything, especially chronic inflammation. So if you have damage, you have to have more cell turnover. You have to have cells to repair. And guess what happens? Cells at some point comes to cell arrest. They can't keep growing. Hopefully not, because too much growth is cancer. But the accumulation of all this cell turnover is another reason why you build up these old senescent cells. So literally, that's aging, is building up of all this stuff. And people just think that I want the best vitamin, I just want the best food. And there's nothing wrong with that, because there are vitamins to activate to break down senescent cells. We call them senolytics. So, for maybe not this occasion, we can dive into senolytics later on. But the lifestyle, the things that drive it is that glucose. I'm talking a lot. Sorry, I'll come to a stop in like 2 minutes. Is that the drivers of glucose and all other refined foods. So just make a little change. I'm talking to the average person. It's better to start with one step than second step. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So the next part is, let's try to recycle. And I'm telling you, this heat and sauna is no joke. Not only is there Finland studies to show that if you use the sauna 4 times or more, you get almost a 50% reduction in the cardiovascular risk. If you use the sauna 2 to 4 times, I know this is like a cliche, everyone's saying it, but I'll tell you the mechanism. That the sauna activates heat shock proteins. All stresses actually activate heat shock proteins. But it's nice because heat shock proteins recycle protein. So more and growth is not always a good thing, not in your stocks, because stocks go up and down like this. Your body cannot have unchecked growth. It needs a little bit of checks and balances. And that's autophagy. That's recycling. Recycling is going to be the new buzzword.
Yeah, definitely. And that was great. That was a great answer. So to circle back there, remember what we're putting into our bodies is going to either cause damage and harm, or we can treat that food as medicine, right? We need to give our cells the correct nutrients to help build them, right? Make them stronger. We do not want those senescent cells. Those senescent cells are going to be zombie cells, like you mentioned, Dr. Habib. They are going to cause oxidative stress. They are going to cause inflammation. They're going to cause osteoporosis, glaucoma, neurodegeneration. They're going to cause type 2 diabetes. They're going to affect the microbiome. They can have, cancer-causing abilities. So it's this downstream effect that starts with really what you're eating. And remember, when we do have those senescent cells, even when, at any point, we want to make sure that we're recycling, like you said, the big buzzword that's coming next. And we can recycle through things like the sauna. And all you're doing is sitting in a sauna. And maybe a little bit uncomfortable, with those higher temperatures, but start slow, change one thing, start at a more of maybe a comfortable temperature that you can get used to, and then you can work your way up in that temperature as well.
And synergy means when you do individual things separately, there's benefit, but together there's synergy, and there's a lot of good science behind that. But on a practical level, when I've done my workout, my muscles have already created heat, as well as nitric oxide and lots of other helpful chemicals in the body. But then I go into the sauna directly after that. So generally in the sauna, you only have to be at that target temperature of around, a regular sauna is about 170 degrees Fahrenheit. A infrared sauna, you can get to a feeling really nice and hot at 130, 140, right? It's not about just the temperatures. What is it doing with the heat inside the body? So if you've exercised those muscles, that's actually pretty deep inside the body, which has generated heat. And then you go into the sauna, so you can get that synergy. And you only have to be in the sauna for 20 minutes. And with the exercise, maybe you can get by with even less than 20 minutes and get that synergistic benefit.
Right. More of the compounded benefit, right. You're putting in the work. So let's just go a little bit farther to get even a greater outcome.
Well, I just want to mention from a very medical point of view, a lot of people know a lot about inflammation. They know about the foods that drive it. They know about the foods that are helpful, and that they know how to nourish the microbiome, and they take the supplements. But one thing I find, and this is not a disrespect, in fact, practitioners can take some heed in what I'm about to say, because it took me some time to figure it out, is that you could be on the right path. You're taking the right stuff, but you didn't take enough of it. That's what makes the medicine a little bit of an art, because no matter how much science we have, there'll be so much we still don't know. So you have to have a sense of, so what one is that not taking it strong enough, and the other is long enough duration. And you could just be at the top of the hill. But if you don't know you're near the top and you give up, it didn't work. 1 month, it didn't work. 2 months, it didn't work. Sometimes when I have things like psoriasis, it takes me months to even see the beginning of the improvement. But once the beginning of the improvement starts, then it's a steady improvement. I couldn't believe with my eyes how psoriasis can actually totally disappear, how thyroid can be completely gone. But you have to use the right amount and for long enough. I just got to slip in my trademark. It's the right, so Rethink Medicine. One of it is, it's got to be the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. The art of medicine.
There you go. Yeah, I can't say it any more plainly than that. No, that's great. So kind of, I guess, going off of that last point, I know you said when we were talking before we filmed the session that a lot of your patients ask, or the most popular question is, how do I get off my meds? Right. So why do people ask that? How do you help? How does that affect their epigenetic methylation and their biological aging?
So this is it. All these things are communicating. Let's just keep it simple. As the function goes down, the blood flow goes down. So the function of your blood vessels. So, for example, men that have erectile problems, 40% of men who are 40 years old have erectile problems. 50% of men who are 50 years old have erectile problems. That's a way of looking at blood flow going down. I'll just give you another example.
Yeah.
A diabetic that has neuropathy, they lose the sensation on the nerves. It's not the nerve problem. They don't have blood flow to the tips of the nerves. So the nutrients, the nerves are starved of nutrients, and then the nerve dies. It's all down to the blood flow. So as function goes down, you can gauge with how you feel. All these symptoms I said, you wake up with energy or you don't. You have energy throughout the day or it's up and down. You feel aches and pains and stiffness. Your brain, you walk into a room and you kind of forget why you entered. These are all function going down. And if you can objectively look at that and improve that, not only will you see your biological age improve, but so you can match up the function going down with the aging process. And in the same way, you can see the function going up and the reversal of the biological age. So I think it's very important for people to understand it's not like a different field. Functional medicine is not different to regular medicine. As your function goes down, it's not that doctors shouldn't help you. They should be versed in understanding function going down. That's called functional medicine. And then disease is what we as an MD are trained in, but it's not, in my opinion, good enough to know disease. Because if you don't know what causes function to go down, how can you ever cure the problem? So when you know the drivers like inflammation, you turn it up, that's one way. When you know how to get the blood flow back, that's the other way. So nitric oxide is in there, inflammation is in there. You have to understand these things. If you don't know how things went down, how can you get them back up or reverse them?
Correct. And there's so many minuscule relationships within that answer, right? When you look at some of those biological aging outcomes, when people have these faster paces of aging, guess what? They have worse balance. They have a weaker grip strength. They have more cognitive decline. They even have faces which are rated as older looking compared to people of their same chronological age. So those things I just named and some things that you were talking about, Dr. Habib, are what healthcare providers used at the beginning of medicine to assess how healthy people were. So if you noticed, your balance is off or your grip strength, or like you said, you walk into a room and you're not sure why you're there, that is decline. That is a decline in function and something is wrong. That is your trigger.
And blood vessels is such a critical part because there's no organ in the body that does not have a blood circulation. So assessing the blood vessels is a really good way of looking at overall impact. So when I look at the blood pressure, I don't look at the pressure in the arm alone. That's called the brachial. We look at the central arterial pressure using a computer. We look at the wave form of the arterial profile because that gives us an idea of stiffness. So stiff blood vessels have low nitric oxide. And so when we look at brain scans, we're actually able to measure the voltage and indirectly the blood flow. So when people have depression, low blood flow. When they have anxiety, low blood flow. When they have insomnia, low blood flow. And obviously if you have a stroke or neurodegenerative. So blood flow is at the root of everything, whether it's the brain. And of course, blood flow, when your blood vessels get stiff and the high blood pressure goes up, the blood flow goes down. Then you can build up plaque, which is cardiovascular or atherosclerosis. There's a science to this madness, and we should not wait until the stress test is positive. We should not wait until you have symptoms. You can actually see the function going down, or find a doctor that can measure the functional assessment. So measuring the softness of the blood vessels, to me, is one of the easiest way. When I see inflammation, I see stiff blood vessels, even if they don't have high blood pressure. That's the thing. You can pick it up very early.
Yeah, definitely. Identify. I know you say here, predict, prevent, and prolong. I love it. So how do you think this will change medicine in the future? So not just functional medicine, but even traditional medicine in return, right? We want to almost merge traditional and functional medicine so we can move more towards that functional path. But how do you think epigenetic methylation testing is actually going to be translated in traditional medicine, or all the things that you're doing, all of that, the more functional tests?
This is, after all, America. It's a capitalistic country. It is going to be the dollar. It's very expensive with disease management because it's not going down. It's probably going to exceed the defense in the percentage of GDP expenditure. So the point we're trying to make is that, the disease model is so expensive. The last 2 years of people's lives, in the last 2 years, they use up 80% of the healthcare dollars. Treating sickness is very, very expensive, not only financial, for the individual. That is not a good state to be in, where you're suffering a prolonged decline. Well, functional medicine keeps you at your peak. So when you're at an advanced age, whatever that is, you should be on no medication. You should be able to spring off the chair. Your mind should be sharp. You should be able to play golf. You should have great physical performance in the gym, great intimacy with your partner, because it's all down to function. And that's the most economic way. That, unfortunately, we're going to have to find the hard way, because they're going to keep on getting more and more bankrupt. And when you're functional, then you prevent the disease. Disease is the most important way. And then eventually they'll see that, oh, we have a way to track this aging process. That's when you'll find that it'll be like a new vital sign, right? A vital sign is the blood pressure. A vital is your temperature. The vital is knowing how fast you're aging. Look, it's not about we're going to predict exactly when you're going to die. In fact, we probably can't, because you could make changes in 30 days and all of a sudden your epigenetics changes, right? But it's more that it's going to be validated, because it's already paralleling function going down. It's already paralleling the onset of early disease. People like myself, we're MDs, functional, we're putting it together. So it's only a matter of time that we will bring the data to show, look, of these 1,000 patients, look, we just prevented or reversed the blood pressure. Of these 1,000 patients, we just reversed their diabetes. And that's the power of epigenetics, because then we can say, well, we don't have to measure all these things. We can just look at this and kind of look at the direction it's going in.
Right. Again, helps with your precision of care. So, and I don't think, even though most functional healthcare providers, I'm not speaking for everyone out there, I'm not even sure about you, Dr. Habib, even though a lot of them are just cash pay and they don't take insurance, they are saving you money. I promise you, I guarantee it 100%, because again, they're identifying early. If those diseases aren't identified early, you're going to be in the sick care model, and then you are going to develop disease and you're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars later. So it's either start now and again, pay a little bit of money to get very, very great precision-based treatment, or suffer the disease at an early age and pay a lot of money trying to fix it.
But it's never too late. It's never too late. So mere absence of disease doesn't make you normal, because before disease, you have dysfunction. So function has like 3 stages. And as that goes down, it becomes dysfunction, and then it becomes disease. It never skips. It always goes down like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been great. Well, Dr. Habib, I have one last question for you. This is a curveball. I'm asking it to everyone at the end of my podcast. If you could be any animal in the world, what would you be and why?
Oh, wow. That is a curveball. I have to think about that. If I could be any animal, why would it be? I'm just going to give you the quick answer. I own a cat. I see the cat, and you know what? They don't say very much. They're watching everything. And then, sometimes you come out of the room and it's like, they were right there, but just a little further. So, I think that's like to me, the analogy would be like a Buddhist. They say, they're sitting on the top of a hill and they watch the world world go by. And that seems like a great aspiration. It's like, well, I'm never be a real high level Buddhist with all these abilities to control thermal temperature, but I can act like a cat.
There you go. That's the next best thing, I think, right? Well, no, I love it. First thing to come to mind, and then you had some reasoning behind it too, so it makes sense. Well, Dr. Habib, thank you so much for joining the Everything Epigenetics podcast. You are a really unique guest because you're an MD. Most of the people we have on this podcast are doing research in the epigenetic methylation space, so I think a lot of people are going to be excited to hear more about how you can use this testing in a clinical setting.
Well, I really appreciate inviting me, and if it wasn't for those smart people, we wouldn't have the tools. So it's good to collaborate, that you've given me these tools and this is what I found and this I mixed it up.
Absolutely.
This is a constant learning.
They're giving you the tools in the toolbox, and you're making them practical. You're making them clinical. So thanks again, Dr. Habib.
Take care now.